abstraction. But there is no real me, only an entity, something illusory. And though I can hide my cold gaze, and you can shake my hand and feel flesh gripping yours, and maybe you can even sense our lifestyles are probably comparable, I simply am not there.
This is 12 Gauge Investigative. Let's jump in.
All right. How's everybody doing this Saturday? My name is 12 Gauge, and this is my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. You know, I thought I'd hop on here with my blind people shades and say hello and do a live today because, you know, it's been a couple days and I've had excruciating pain in my eye, man. It's like, I don't even know. I did a transport. And next thing you know, my eye swelled up. So I don't know if I got something in it from the vents of the AC or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but went to the doctor, got some eye drops, and they're supposed to have like what you call it in it. Let me change some of this stuff because y'all know how I am when it comes to certain things. Can only do stuff so much, and then it just kind of becomes a little too much. All right, yeah, I don't know what's up with my eyes, but I don't know. She said it wasn't pink eye. She said it looked like more like an infection or some sort. But it was hurting like a son of a gun. But it didn't have any kind of the pink eye qualities to it. So she was able to take the black light and even look in there, squirt some stuff in there, and it just hurts. It just hurts. It's doing well at the moment, so I thought I'd hop on here and I'd I'd say hello to you guys and be able to even present something. I've heard that some documents have came out, so y'all know how I am. I don't want to go and read every freaking document when somebody else is going to be able to discuss them. So let's kind of see what Ashley and Jen have to say about these documents.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this bonus episode of Drop Dead Serious. I needed to get to the mic, and I'll tell you why. Whenever a document drops in the Idaho quadruple murders, I just am frantic. I'm going all through it, looking for the information that's been withheld from us under a gag order for the last 2.5 years. And today didn't disappoint. More documents dropped in the Idaho massacre. And we're learning a little bit more that, well, you'd call them bad facts if you're Brian Koberger, and real bad facts if you're his lawyer. So basically what we're learning now is, you know all about the K-bar knife, right? We've already learned that search histories showed that Brian Koberger had purchased a K-bar knife sheath, and a sharpener. And he had done that well before the murders, weirdly, well before even moving to Idaho. So if he is the killer, he's like planning this thing before he really even knows who his targets are going to be. And then after the murders, his search history showed that he was looking for what the prosecutors say is a replacement sheath. Because guess what? He left the sheath, if he's the killer, under one of the kids' bodies.
Well, that's true. I mean, and we've talked about that before. We talked about that in length, on one of my other videos. How he did supposedly order a K-bar, a sharpener, And of course, most K-bars come with a sheath. You know what I think I'm gonna do? I'm gonna just turn the camera off and speak without the camera because it's hard having these glasses and trying to maneuver stuff. So I hope that y'all understand. Thank you so much for being here, Citrus, Mickey, Texas, Rondi. Let's just do it that way. Okay. So we've heard about the K bar. Obviously, the K bar comes with a knife sheath and a sharpener. But this, I think they're talking about the new stuff is they found out where the order history has somehow came directed to his with his name, which means that it was directly sent to Brian. It wasn't sent to a family member. It wasn't sent to anybody else at that household, but it was sent to him. So if that's true, then that changes a little bit more of the picture that's been painted throughout the time because the last that we heard, well, people were saying, well, it could have been sent to the family could have ordered it, it could have been in a camping trip, um, it could have been all kinds of stuff bundled up, and it could have came to the family. Well, that's logical enough. I mean, it really is. I'm not going to argue that point because I mean, if you're gonna look at all angles, why not look at that, right? That's logical. But now we're finding out that this specifically came to Brian. It came addressed to him. It didn't come addressed to the family. It didn't come addressed to anybody else. So that puts a little different spin on it. You know what I'm saying? It puts a big spin on it that it came directly addressed to him. So let's continue to hear what they got to say.
Also, look for a replacement knife. Today, we're learning that he also searched how to wipe out your search history. And that's really important, right? I always say it's what you try to hide as much as what you do that can come off real bad to a jury. There's other stuff too about the K bar knife and sheath being shipped to his Pennsylvania family's home, but to his name. That's also in the documents. And a ruling on a lot of these things that the defense has wanted to scrap from the trial. Of course, the defense wants almost everything scrapped from the trial, and they're fighting tooth and nail. But this judge not having a lot of it, basically saying the whole idea that Dylan Mortensen, a surviving roommate, who said she saw the figure all draped in black with the mask and the bushy eyebrows walk right past her door, and she froze in a state of shock. Right? Um, the defense wanted nothing in the trial about bushy eyebrows and her description, and they lost.
Okay, before we go on to the bushy eyebrows, let's talk about that knife because we were just talking about it. As Mickey says, okay, it's his knife. So where is it? Where is that knife? If you ordered it, that's like to say, I know a lot of us like to order off Amazon. There's an Amazon history on our computers, laptop, tablets, phones, whatever we ordered from. So there's a history left behind, right? So if we order something and then later on, everything is tracked to us and it's been supposedly used in a nefarious fashion, don't you think that the first thing somebody's going to ask, where is it? Where's the knife? Where's the sharpener? Where's the sheath? That's an interesting question. And also, she's talking about
Today, we learned that is not going to happen. They are not going to be able to preclude Dylan Mortensen's description of a man with bushy eyebrows.
Okay, she was talking about the bushy eyebrows that were trying to get taken from the record in the hearings, in the motions, that they couldn't say bushy eyebrows because guess what? who has bushy eyebrows that is going to be seated in the courtroom once this trial starts? Can anybody in the chat, going once, going twice, going 3 times, who has the bushiest eyebrows in the room? Who could that possibly be? Somebody? Anybody? Somebody? Anybody? Who has the bushy eyebrows? The bushiest eyebrows in the room, supposedly. Can anybody tell me? Brian, BK, very good. So, the defense was wanting to get rid of that wording, bushy eyebrows, because they figured that it would influence the jury pool and the jury looking at Mr. Koberger sitting across from them with bushy eyebrows. Let's continue on.
Right, walking by. That will come into this trial. And he will be sitting there at the defense table. But I don't know if he'll have his bushy eyebrows. I don't know if he'll trim them again. But we've got photos, right, of what he looked like the morning after, that picture in the bathroom with his bushy eyebrows. So that's happening. And then the whole idea that the defense wanted certain words excluded from the trial, like murder and murderer, that ain't happening either. But you know who's best at analyzing what all of these incredible people...
So let me ask you guys in the chat, because this is a pretty short video, so we got some time to talk. I've always wondered, and I know that the defense is wanting these words thrown out for a particular reason. But have you ever wondered what made them specifically target these words? Psychopath, sociopath, murderer, bushy eyebrows. Give me your thoughts. Give me your thoughts in the chat. What would make the defense so preoccupied with these wordings that they had to file a motion to get them taken or stricken from the trial? Give me your thoughts, please. Tell me what you think. Because obviously they were pretty important for them to file a motion to get them taken out. So once again, here are the words: sociopath, psychopath, murderer, bushy eyebrows. What would make the defense want to focus on words? Well, I know that it's a throwing spaghetti at the wall, but what precludes them to wanting to specifically focus on these words? Because, just like we were all listening to the hearing, the prosecution said we didn't even have we don't even have a notion of using psychopaths or sociopaths. We weren't even going to really use those words. Hell, the only time we were really going to use murderer was to describe what he was being accused of. And bushy eyebrows? Bushy eyebrows. Let me see what some of you are saying. Because they're based on a drunk off harassed witness, and she's never been diagnosed as such as prejudicial. Those words have a bad impression in the jury's minds, negative impact, weak ass society that we live in. I like that. Hey Alexi, good to see you. So I don't know. I like what you are saying there. Let's see what Ashley has to say.
pieces of evidence and information mean? Jennifer Coffendorfer. She's a former FBI specialist, and she's amazing at all things Idaho because she has followed this case from start to finish. Jennifer Coffendorfer, I always turn to you because I don't know if you keep a diary of all of the developments of what happens in Idaho, but every time something happens, it feels earth-shattering to me. Do you think that this recent revelation is earth-shattering, that he tried to potentially cover his tracks if the allegations are true?
I think it's very was suspected. In other words, I would have anticipated that. I think he really was smart how he completed this mission of his. Actually, Ashley, I know he was caught, but at the end of the day, I really believe, but for that DNA leading them toward him, this could still be unsolved.
We might not know. I am always fascinated when the digital forensics turn up Google and search behaviors, and I'm even more fascinated when they turn up evidence of trying to erase those behaviors, because to me that is even bigger than a search, is trying to get rid of searches. I don't know. Do you think a jury sees it the same way? Do you think investigators have these eureka moments when they come across things like this?
Well, it's a feeling of, to be quite frank, euphoric almost, because now it's like you have the lie, right? You have the truth of what they did, which is bad enough, and it's like when the child does something bad and then they lie, that makes it even worse. So it's a very euphoric moment for an investigator because it points out really their consciousness of guilt.
So the other thing is, and I always see this with defense attorneys, if they're worth their weight in salt, is, and I could see Ann Taylor going this way already with the awful facts of purchasing a K-bar knife, purchasing a sheath, purchasing a sharpener, and then after the murders, searching for a replacement. They called it a replacement knife and sheath. I could see.
So I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. A lot of times I'm pretty cut and dry with certain stuff, but sometimes I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And today, I'm going to ask you, Chad, is there any reason that, because I want you to think a little bit rather than just take stuff at core value, is there any reason that Brian would have been on Amazon re-looking at a K-bar knife, because they come with a sheath? So is there any other reason after the murders that he could have potentially been looking for these objects, not on a replacement issue, but just something else? I'm not saying that that's what he did or that what you might say is the reason, but always like to hear different stuff. Southwest Firefly said bushy brows, about 6 foot, slim build, all in black. Even without the the defense is doomed. 12 gauge words matter. First impression, as those words are spoken. I did after. Lots of people did out of curiosity. That was a stupid move to try to reorder. To see if he could buy a USMC one. Why would he if he had all three still in his possession? And those are great comments. I'm just wondering if there's any other reason behind re-looking at this knife and sheath. Because, as we've heard experts talk, such as Gary Bricado and such as Matt Murphy and Ann Burgess and even Chris McDonough and some of the other people that he has on panel in the interview room, we've heard them talk on killers having a fascination with their weapons. That fascination with that weapon is so intense, it becomes a part of them almost. So Could the fact that he had to throw away the knife, if he did so, if he, if it got lost along the way, or he threw it somewhere or buried it somewhere. Obviously, we know what happened to the sheath. I don't know what happened to the sharpener, but the fascination with that knife, could that have been enough for him to potentially reorder another one? I'm just asking. I'm not saying this is what happened, but I'm just asking right now. So, could that fascination with that K bar? Well, I can't have the original one, but I can get another one. And even though that wasn't used in the murder, supposedly, the memory is still associated with me holding the K bar and doing what I did with the K bar. And he thinks about where that knife is every day. Yeah, Danny Rowland bought his at an Army Navy store. Yeah, because there's a fascination with the murder weapon. It's an attachment to them. It is not just a murder weapon to a lot of these killers. It is so intimate that the fact that they don't have it anymore, or the association, kind of interrupts the replay of the murder. That's a good question. I'm also wondering why Amazon. Murder weapon has never been disclosed, never once. You're right. You're right. So we don't know exactly where it is, where it could be, where it might be. I mean, who knows? For all we know, they might have it. We don't know.
See Ann Taylor going towards the defense of, yes, but you don't know who was searching, because there were plenty of people using that Amazon account in the house in Pennsylvania where the Kobergers lived. But now you have this added nugget. Well, then which one was trying to hide it?
Yeah, exactly so. And her argument, if she takes this route, will fall so flat. And this is why. They're going to have the credit card information that is probably, I believe, from what they're saying, going to line up with Brian Koberger. They're also going to have specific keystrokes that are likely specifically from his computer, not from the mother's computer or anybody else's computer.
Okay, if you didn't catch that, that is huge right there. And she's gonna explain it. Having those keystrokes is more applicable towards pattern. In the past, she's going to mention, in the past, they're going to say, well, how do you know that they are the ones that ordered the knife? How are you going to know that he was the one that ordered that knife? Well, you're going to be able to see in those keystrokes the pattern of ability to be able to see where those search histories went to. And there's going to be a big boom in this, so to speak. I haven't read those documents because I've had an eye swollen. So that's why I chose to do this a little bit. I didn't feel like going and reading those documents with one eye. It's all I could do to get through my week of study with one eye. So please don't challenge me when it comes to what was in the documents and what's not. I would definitely go back and read those, but for time constraints and pain, I didn't feel like doing it. So let's see what they continue to say about this, because it's interesting to me exactly what she's talking about right now.
Computer. And when you put it all together, it's going to point toward Brian Koberger.
Yeah, those are, I remember long ago in the advent, like, because I've been around forever, right? 38 years now. But I remember in the early days when the first thing out of a defense attorney's mouth would be, you don't know who was doing the typing. And it was a very strong argument. And oftentimes it was the argument that cleared a lot of people. Nobody knows look, who, in Casey Anthony, who was the one searching chloroform? They said it could have been anybody in her house. So I know that that's very strong, but lately it's getting less and less strong, just with patterning, right? The pattern of when you were online, what you were doing right beforehand. Were you searching your email and then suddenly searching, for a K-bar knife? That gives you an indication that it maybe wasn't mom searching for a K-bar. But I always find it fascinating when there is an attempt, like in OJ, to throw everything at this jury. It's almost like flooding the zone so that they got a million crappy things, but it's a million of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. I mean, the defense doing that is throwing mud up against the wall over and over again. We as consumers watch this every time I see Ann Taylor coming in, and it just is detracting from the decent points she makes. And I don't think that will be lost on a jury. I believe in juries.
I mean, I do too. But I've been deflated so often. Like OJ was my big first massive deflation. And it really set me on a course to watch so carefully how these defense attorneys are making what sound like foolish arguments to us, people who are steeped in this business, but can be clutter. They can be clutter to juries to hear all this stuff. And
she's right on point, because I've sat in a capital murder trial probably 4 or 5 months ago, and listening to the evidence, I didn't know anything about the case. I was sitting in there with my boss, and we were listening to this capital murder trial. And the defense attorney gave his closing arguments, and he was talking about, he painted a picture. He was painting the picture as if you were there in the room with the accused. And he was stating, well, the gun residue could have got on his clothing due to the gun that was being fired behind him. The gun residue would have left a cloud, and the gun residue, the bullets being fired, and everything would have left like a cloud of smoke. The smoke would have had the residue on it, therefore settling on the accused's clothing. And as he was shuffling to get out of the room due to the gunfire, he just happened to smudge his shoe with blood from one of the people that got shot. And I thought, man, this is some stuff right here. Like, I was thinking to myself, that doesn't make sense to me, but those jurors seem to be right in on it. I mean, because it's all about being able to tell that story, to paint that picture for them. Even if it's not the picture of what actually happened, it's painting the picture of reasonable doubt. If you can get one to buy what you're painting and actually see what you see and actually go against, voting guilty, then you've done your job. Kind of like in Casey Anthony's case, since she brought her up. Think about that case. If you are versed in that case, Casey Anthony should have been found guilty in my eyes. But her defense attorney, Jose Baez, whatever his name is, painted such a compelling argument that he was able to plant that seed of doubt in the jury's mind, where it confused them so much from the logic of the criminal evidence that they had, that they came back with a not guilty verdict. So back to the capital murder one that I was just talking about. I was almost on board with the defense and thinking, man, maybe this dude didn't do it. I wasn't buying the cloud of smoke, the dust settling on his clothes and all this stuff, right? But then the assistant DA gets up there and she doesn't paint a picture. She busts out the evidence that they got. She shows the jury the bloody pair of shoes. She demonstrates how that blood could have not gotten on the front of the or on the back of the shoe if he was crawling forward. She shows how there was blood toward his front, spattered as if he was the shooter. And she went on and on and on, and she was talking about the DNA evidence. And she even used the quadrillion wording. One in quadrillionth or whatever. Quadrillionth. And at the end, I was like, Jesus. She just like blew it out of the ballpark. Because instead of painting the picture, she showed the evidence. And the jury came back with a guilty verdict, sentenced to 40 years. So it's always a gamble sometimes. Who could paint the bigger, better version of what you're trying to get the jury to see or sway in your direction? And unfortunately, at this point, those 12 are going to be the only important people in the case. People are going to continue to focus on the attorney. They're going to focus on the judge. They're going to focus on the witnesses. But all that's not going to matter. It's those 12 people seated, listening, day in, day out, to see who paints the better picture. So I ask you today, and I hope that you remember this live, okay? Who has the capability, not really lying, but who has the capability of painting a more diverse picture of what could have happened rather than what did happen? Do you see the defense being able to persuade the jury to see it in their eyes? Do they have the capability, the artisticness with wording, the theatrics? Do they have all this stuff to persuade the jury to see it in their light? Or is Ann Taylor, Massoff, and Bicca, are they going to be able to have the ability to counteract anything that the prosecution brings up there and paint it in a way where it may be there, but this is the reason why it was there? Or this is the reason it could have been there because of this or that. So I want you to think about that. Who has the greater propensity to win in the theatrics avenue? Is it the prosecution or is it the defense? Because I want you to think about that, because the jury is the only thing that's going to matter from here on out. All these documents, all these things that we can discuss and go over and all this, it's important, of course. But it's almost time for the jury to take the grandstand, because they're the one that's going to be in charge of guilty or innocence. So nobody's answering that. So tell me, is it the prosecution or the defense?
In this respect, let's just go on to another thing that came out today. And that is that, Ann Taylor was fighting to preclude Dylan Mortensen's description of bushy eyebrows. For Christ's sake, you get an eyewitness to a potential murderer walking past your door, and you're trying to preclude anything that eyewitness says. Like, what are the odds anything would get precluded from an eyewitness to the killer?
They're not good, Ashley, in preach, because this nugget about these eyebrows has always been so important. His eyebrows are so bushy, and we saw them trim them all up for the court appearances, which is kind of like that lie, that erase. You just can't erase what the reality is. And that new photo of him in front of the shower, that puts those eyebrows on him at that time.
And by the way, can I just say, the creepy, gross feeling that I got when I saw it, and a million thoughts were flooding through my head as I looked at the shower, the time, all the things that went with that photograph. The fact that the prosecutors can get this picture in based on, it's all because we need to talk about bushy eyebrows, not because we want to show a guy who, if he is the killer, was so incredibly proud of his work just hours after doing it.
Yeah, it's so true. That photo's coming in, and it's coming in for that bushy eyebrow.
I'm asking, in the way that all these documents that are coming out with all these nuggets, which side is going to be able to put together the best argument for the evidence to point to him being the killer, or who's going to be able to do the closing argument the best as the reason why it couldn't have been him? Because instead of looking at these things that are coming out, just like what they're saying right now as far as this photo, these are things the jury's going to be shown. These are things the jury's going to be shown. And, they see that picture of Brian at 10:31 a.m. To many people, okay, so he took the selfie the morning after the murder. There's no blood on him. There's no blood in the backdrop. There's nothing. He's not holding up a K-bar. And I'm not for no reason switching my opinion on this, but I'm just showing you the alternate side, because there's going to be two sides to everything. There really is. Whether you believe it or not, that's your beliefs, but there are two sides to everything, and a jury has to take into account both sides. They're not going to be pro defense, they're not going to be pro prosecution. It's not going to be like that. So they're going to be asking these questions to themselves about, okay, why are they showing this picture? Okay, the defense is trying, or the prosecution saying it correlates with the timeline and the bushy eyebrows. Okay, but like what she just said, is it going to come across to the jury as, well, he posted this picture gloating of what he just did hours earlier? And that's what I'm saying is these little things that people blow off as not being important in these documents, but trying to put together the pieces to add up to these little things, that's not how it goes. The jury is going to be shown certain things, and a lot of this stuff that we've all spent multitudes of hours talking about are never even going to make the trial floor. And that's what's sad about all this, is a lot of this isn't even going to make the trial floor. Because of those questions that I'm asking right now, as far as, if you're wanting to prove, if you're the prosecution, you're wanting to have the burden to prove that this is the man, well, you're going to tell it in the story without the least amount of avenue for loopholes, rabbit holes, or any kind of misdirective or guidedness. You're going to want to tell it straight. It's going to be straight and to the point. It's not going to be any of this stuff about, well, this happened, that happened, there was this crying, there was that crying, all this stuff. I mean, if that makes it in a trial, so be it. But what I'm telling you is going to be cut and dry and direct. And the theatrics that you believe that are going to be in the trial are not going to be there. They're not going to be there. Yeah, I get that. I get that. I get that, Southwest Firefly. I'm not saying anything about the document drops. I'm just saying that a lot of people, not necessarily in this chat, okay, so don't get offended. A lot of people do take those documents as meaning that they've actually found something that goes for their narrative or for their belief patterns, and that there's no way that they possibly have any evidence or no evidence or blah blah blah, all that stuff, because they don't understand the culpability of the evidence that is there and what's going to be put into a condensed portion for the jury to hear. You're telling the jury what happened in your eyes that made Mr. Koberger above everybody else have the propensity to be the killer of 4 kids, and to not only be a killer, but to be an individual who has a felony burglary charge on him. So you're telling the story. What I asked earlier is, the prosecution, do they have the oomph enough to present that? Do they have the oomph enough to counteract certain things in trial? Do they have the oomph enough to cross-examine witnesses and experts? These are the things that are going to matter in the coming months. These are the things that's going to take place in the coming months. And when the trial starts, the jury has the final say. Jury by his peers. What the jurors are going to be asked, I don't know if any of you in chat has ever served on jury duty. I know a lot of times the questions are pretty basic. The questions ask you, well, what do you do for a living? Have you ever had this happen? Did this ever happen to you? Have you ever been a part of this? Have you ever been this, that, and the other? And they don't tell you right offhand unless they disqualify you. You know, if you say something that they don't agree with, they'll be like, okay, thank you, you're dismissed. And that pretty much tells you, hey, we didn't want you. You get what I'm saying? So it's going to be interesting, but I wanted to throw that out there because, you know, we're getting to that part where it's no longer about what Ann Taylor is talking about or trying to sling up against the wall. We're getting to that part where that jury's going to get picked. And we're getting to that part where we're going to actually go to trial. And they're actually going to call witnesses and they're going to be cross-examined and they're going to be asking for diagrams and all this other stuff. And whether you agree whether those diagrams of the dollhouse should be in there or whether, you know, certain things should be said, certain pictures of the victim should be shown, none of that matters in the real trial. They're the ones trying it. And they're trying to show the jury without a reasonable doubt, Mr. Koberger was the guy we believe committed these crimes. And this is how we have formulated our thought pattern. So listen carefully with us.
Description that Dylan came because the judge ruled it's all coming in.
Yeah, but you know what the jury's going to think, right? Because they're going to say, what hour the picture was taken. Look at looks like the shower behind you. It looks like he's in his bathroom. Looks like he's pretty clean. I mean, the jury's going to get the same feeling I did, right? Like, wait, this is only just a couple hours after the murder. Oh my God. This isn't just a picture of his bushy eyebrows. This is a picture potentially of a man who is thrilled with his handiwork.
Absolutely. That's why people take selfies. They want to memorialize an event. They want to memorialize where they're at. He is so proud. And the earbuds, Ashley, what is he listening to? I guarantee there's going to be a song that he had that corresponded with those murders and his idea to murder, if indeed he is the one that's guilty.
Oh my God, why do you have to do that? Do you know what? I'm going to take you back to my cub reporter days in Canada. There was this terrible, terrible murder. You probably heard something about it in the U.S. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka.
Know the case well. I use it in my classes.
Well, it's one of my first cases that I really felt, you know, as a reporter, you know, did start to finish. These private school girls and young teenage girls abducted and raped and kept in the basement, and all these terrible things were happening. And one of the details in that case was that Paul Bernardo was urinating on one of these girls in the bathtub. She was chained up in the bathroom in the basement to one of my favorite songs. And I have never been able to listen to that song again. It's called Little Bones by the Tragically Hip. If you're Canadian, you're probably freaking out right now. If you're American, you're like, who are they? But it really changed it for me. My God, I'm telling you, Coffindoffer, I get a sick feeling decades later when I hear that song because of that detail. So I'm hoping that it's not going to be what you just said, a song that we all love and know and, you know, now might be associated with this.
Yeah. I think it just may be.
Okay. The other thing is, I thought this was nuts. I couldn't even believe it was being, litigated. But the defense didn't want certain inflammatory words being used during the trial. Okay, maybe I get psychopath, sociopath, but murderer in a quadruple murder trial?
Hey, listen, Ashley, they want everything out. I mean, that's been Ann Taylor's MO. And she, you saw the hearing. She would have 3 different experts to say the exact same thing for the exact same reasons. She is an absolute overkill, no pun intended, in her approach to these cases. But I tell you what the judge ruled that really did bother me in a sense, but I think it's actually going to help the prosecution. They can't use trace DNA. They can't use touch DNA. And you know what? They're going to have to use DNA. And I think that's stronger for them to just say DNA rather than categorize it. But the defense asked for it. The defense got it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big point right there. And I agree with Jennifer on that, whether you do or not. It seems like people do put a lot more emphasis on, it would just trace DNA or it would just touch DNA. Well, DNA is DNA, as she had said, DNA is DNA. To minimize it would be able to say, well, it's not that um that important. It's not that kind of important DNA. So to not be able to say trace or touch, I believe that's a win-win. Because it's DNA after the fact. It's not mitochondrial, it's not any of that, but it's DNA after the fact. And it should always be discussed in that way. I believe that sometimes people they get so caught up in the semantics of the wordings, they minimize a lot of stuff that ultimately has greater value all the way around than to just focus on one of the words. But that's just me. That's just me. Well, now it's just going to be called DNA. Now it's not going to be transfer no more.
You're right. I never thought of it. It's much stronger to say DNA than touch DNA or trace DNA or mitochondrial DNA. Okay, one last thing I want to ask you about, and I'm going back to the knife thing. Apparently, the evidence showed that the knife and the sheath were shipped to Brian Koberger at his family address in Pennsylvania. There's a bunch of people who live there, right? And it's out, I think, sort of in the Poconos. So you could say, you could mitigate that, right? By saying, well, they are campers and they're outdoorsmen, and why not have a K-bar knife? But at the same time, what a coinkydink.
Well, the problem is it ended up under Maddie Mogan's massacred body. So,
well, a knife, a sheath, not necessarily this sheath, but
you're right. I have to pull back a little, but the coincidence is far too overwhelming for that to be delivered there, for it to be the right sheath corresponding with the same murder weapon that they believe was used on these 4 and to be found. So I think between.
And I've heard a lot of people over the weeks talking about circumstantial evidence. Well, if they've done any kind of research on cases, they would understand that there's a lot of cases that there have been convictions based on circumstantial evidence. Does it mean that means that it didn't happen? No, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It means that the circumstances lined up with it being more you than, let's say, somebody down the street who didn't have any of these connections. So whenever people get on that circumstantial evidence train, I'm kind of going like, okay, you're just saying that because it sounds like it's not definitive. And it's not definitive because of certain things that are missing, but there's more propensity of this being a collaboration of event that led to the crime rather than what you're trying to paint it as. Like they're saying that the car is circumstantial, the phone pings are circumstantial, um, this and that are circumstantial. Well, I'm going to tell you, there's more of a circumstance and coincidence factor that point in the direction of this individual that's been locked up for this many years than any of the frat kids, than any of the Chapins, any of the alternate suspects, any of all these other people. And I'm going to get to the alternate suspects here in a minute. So, circumstantial evidence can convict somebody. So don't get so caught up in the wording that you believe that just because people keep throwing that out and saying, well, it's circumstantial, it's circumstantial. Well, you know what? It wouldn't be circumstantial if the person who those circumstances are leading to hadn't left a trail. Did you hear that? If that person who those circumstances are leading to hadn't left a trail of this, where it even looked like them, they wouldn't be in jail. No matter what your thinking of law enforcement is, they wouldn't be in jail. And that's just the bottom line.
That purchase and, of course, the DNA combined with the location of the sheath, to me, it is just overwhelming facts for Brian Kohberger, even if you erased a lot of the other. And this is the problem for Brian Kohberger, Ashley. There's a lot more.
There's a lot more, which is why you have to come back. The next time a doc drops, will you join me?
I'd love to join you, Ashley. I always appreciate being on your show, and I just appreciate you and all you do for true crime.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer. We'll see you soon.
All right. See you soon.
My great thanks to Jennifer Coffendorfer for her insight. And yes, she will be back. And thank you for listening to this bonus episode. I always say make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss the bonus episodes. It's real super rando. I drop them when stuff happens, and I definitely want you to get them. So subscribe and you will get them in your inbox right away. I also like to hear from you. If you're watching on YouTube, make a comment for sure. I always want to hear how you feel about this and what you want me to cover more or less of. And if you're listening, definitely give me a comment about what you think. And please remember, I always say this, but it's super important. The truth isn't just serious. It is drop dead serious.
Nice. So I'm going to show y'all what I put on my community tab. I don't know if they still call it that. They call it post now. So this is what I put. And these are some of the things that I've talked about tonight. I've talked about the psychopath, sociopath being banned, no DNA genealogy evidence, IgG. They're going to agree that they are just going to use the word tip. They can't use autism as an aggravator. No misleading DNA stats. The defense can challenge tip that named him. The prosecution, Amazon K-Bar purchases allowed. Prior traffic stop with redaction allowed. So they're going to let the traffic stop that they were arguing about in the last hearing to be allowed. The 3D model of the crime scene is okayed. Because I agree that, they're probably going to have a lot of videos, a lot of Faro scanning and everything else going alongside with that. No solid alibi has been given to this point. No alibi defense for now, so still waiting on that as we've waited all this time. Alternate suspects need real proof due by May 14th. And I believe that it was stated that in order to have the alternate suspects admitted, that they would have to be named. And there's a reminder, the graphic crime scene photos and the word murder are not blocked. The jury will see and hear them, which is always interesting to me. What do y'all think about that? Pretty cool, huh? Cold burger. Cheeseburger's okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I tell you, the only thing that's really going to matter from here on out is the jurors. So I hope that y'all do pay attention to the jury selection. I hope you. I wonder if this is the one I just played. I don't think so. There was, here's another one on Ashley Banfield, and this one talking about the deleted Amazon history. And I thought this one was pretty cool too. It's not the one I just played. I think I meant to play this one. So here we go.
I poke around on Amazon. I put stuff in the cart. Sometimes I buy it. Sometimes I just forget about it. Sometimes I change my mind. Amazon's always good at reminding me, though, if I forget. One thing I do not do, however, I do not look for ways to erase the fact that I was ever at those sites in the first place. And if I am ever charged with 4 murders, that's probably going to help my defense. Not so much for Brian Koberger. New documents that just dropped tonight show Idaho prosecutors have some more heavy ammo against him in his quadruple murder case. We had been kept from these details for 2.5 years. That pesky gag order has seen to it. Little by little, morsels of information are dropping in the way of pretrial court documents, and tonight, a bombshell. We already knew that Koberger's Amazon history showed that he bought a K-bar knife, according to the prosecutors, and a K-bar sheath and a sharpener months before the murders. And we also learned that he searched for what the prosecutors call a replacement knife and sheath after the murders. Convenient. But today we learned that whoever's fingers were doing the walking on that Amazon account looked for ways to delete that shopping history right after the murders. Bad fact. Prosecution documents also show that the K-bar knife and sheath were, quote, shipped to Brian Koberger at his family address in Pennsylvania, end quote. The documents continue with, quote, after the homicides, activity from the same account showed the user navigated pages related to the deletion of account activity, and a week later viewed pages associated with K-bar knife and sheath. This evidence.
So what do you guys think in the chat when you hear that this K-bar and the sheath and the sharpener were delivered to Brian Koberger? What do y'all think about that? Without getting all up in arms about he's guilty and all this stuff, just give me your thoughts on what you think after finally hearing that it was shipped to Koberger, to him, not his family, not his sisters, none of that, but was shipped to Brian by NAM. And you're going to be able to also look at the credit card associated with that purchase. Because you're telling me that if I order something on Amazon, Nike.com, wherever I order online, my credit card is going to be associated with that. Unless I happen to use somebody else's credit card. But why would somebody else in that house have used Brian's credit card to order a K-bar knife and a sharpener?
Evidence establishes significant connection between defendant and K-bar knife and sheath. It's hard enough to hide something like that in real life. But whoever killed those poor kids was able to hide that because no one's ever found the actual K-bar knife. But he screwed up with that, or she. This was found under the body of Maddie Mogan. And on that little snap, DNA. Prosecutors say that DNA led them right to Koberger.
I've heard people talk about DNA wasn't found on the knife sheath. It was blood that was found on the knife sheath that had DNA in it. And people go on and on and on and on and on about that. How come people make it so complex? How come it has to be so complex? They go on and on and on about the blood. There was blood found, there were 3 forms of blood found on the knife sheath. We've always heard there's only one single cell DNA or one match of the DNA found on that knife sheath. It wasn't mixed. There wasn't other people's DNA mixed involved in that knife sheath. We've always heard it was one. And guess who that one was?
I believe the legal term for the stuff we learned in the document tonight is called mic drop. Lisa Bonner knows a lot more about that technical stuff than I do. She's a managing partner of Bonner Law, and she's here with me live. Lisa, evidence found is one thing, but evidence that a defendant tries to hide is sometimes even more powerful.
Yes, it is. In this instance, it led them to connect significantly the search history and the connection between the knife sheath and the DNA. The search history clearly shows that the same account that was used to search for the knife, to ship to the knife, and to delete the history was the same name and email and the purchase history of the defendant. And that is
that's
a
never
mic drop,
good.
Ashley.
That's a mic drop. So here's another mic-ish. Here's a little like lavalier drop. And that is that they also said it's a family account, right? That's what the defense said. It's a family account. You don't know who in this family was buying the knife. We live in the Poconos and there's hunting and camping and all the rest. But the address is Brian Koberger. It's shipped to Brian Koberger. It's not shipped to mom and it's not shipped to dad. And by the way, if it is mom and dad doing the purchasing, was it also mom and dad trying to scrub that account after the murders?
Well, that's interesting because this is going to turn on if the defendant is trying to establish that can be established during cross-examination. They were trying to get that evidence removed. And they were trying to say that is not going to happen. It's highly prejudicial. And in this instance, the judge said, that's not the case. If you want to say it's a parent's account, if you want to say it's a family's account, then you can challenge that in court. But this is relevant. This establishes a significant connection. And therefore, it is probative evidence that we are going to allow to be admitted. And you may challenge that on your cross-examination. It's as simple as that.
I always love the fight in court, the probative versus prejudicial. Everything, all evidence is prejudicial, right? It's like, what are you talking about? But I get it. Sometimes it's beyond the pale. However, the bushy eyebrows, it turns out the judge said, sorry, that's not something that's so prejudicial. That is an eyewitness account. The defense wanted to actually bury an eyewitness account. It did not happen. I suppose you're not surprised.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not surprised because this is the only witness that they have in this instance. This is the only witness. Again, the judge said that the evidence was consistent and it was clear. The witness gave the same description of the eyebrows. The eyebrows was almost its own character, if you will, in this narrative. Mm-hmm. She was very clear about, I don't remember much about what the person looked like. I don't remember the nose. I don't remember the eyes. I do remember it was an eyebrow or an eyebrow, and it was bushy eyebrows. And that is the situation that we are looking at in this instance. Whether or not this was a consistent and clear connection. And it was not prejudicial. This was the only witness. And again, they can challenge this on cross-examination.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation
And you know that's the beauty of our judicial system is the ability to cross-examine. You know, you're able to cross-examine your accusers. You're able to you seek out the answers that you don't understand through clarity of cross-examination. So it'll be awesome to hear who gets called to the stand and who doesn't. You know, I don't believe the alibi is going to be something that's going to be discussed, if it is, until probably the last minute. That's probably going to be the last minute type thing. It's the alibi. And it's going to be very difficult for him to find somebody to validate that alibi. Very difficult. I thought you said you were Cherokee. Anyways, I think I'm going to hop off here, take a little break, but I will be back with Nina. We'll be talking about the ego depletion that we were going to do yesterday. Probably going to start at 8:30 Central, so y'all be looking out for that. Yeah, it is embarrassing to say the least. But y'all be back at 8:30. Give us some support. We've done the ego depletion before, but hopefully it'll be a little different this time around. Because there's been a lot of new subscribers lately, and hopefully we'll be able to give them the best information possible. Those of you that gave some good insight in here, thank you very much for your time, your energy, and your committedness to the channel. Hope to see each and every one of you here in a little while. That is 8:30 Central Time. Maestro, cue that music.